Hi, and welcome to my video all about choosing how to expand your roster in Romancing Saga Re universe. This video can be seen as a continuation of my last guide about evaluating SS styles. If you haven't seen that, I'd recommend starting there. And as a quick note before I dive into it, the advice herein can be used to decide not only how to expand your roster, but also who to train up from your current roster, so keep that in mind. When deciding how to expand one's roster, the goal is simple. Become stronger so you can clear more content and/or clear content faster. And the first rule to apply when making this determination is fairly straightforward and intuitive. Namely, you want to try and have strong styles for every damage type in the game. So this means you want strong styles that cover the following attack types: Slash, Blunt, Pierce, Heat, Cold, Lightning, Sun, and Shadow. This is because when farming content, the enemies will generally be weak to one or two particular damage types, so having styles that can target that weakness will increase your effectiveness tremendously. The important thing to realize here is that damage type doesn't always correspond directly with weapon type. Take this SS Polka style for example. He uses a sword, but all of his attacks have a heat damage type, as indicated in the top right corner of the attack. So we would classify Polka as a strictly heat-based damage dealer. Note some styles can cover more than one damage type, and these are the exception to the norm. A couple of examples of these from my own roster include Leonard, who has both Slash and Blunt skills, and Joe, who can deal heat and cold damage simultaneously. The ability to deal more than one damage type with a single skill is particularly useful. The next point I want to bring up may be a little less obvious but no less important. And that is, you want good coverage for the various different roles in the game. To give a high-level description of what I mean by this, some basic roles include single target nukers, AoE damage dealers, tanks, and healers. Within each of these categories are subcategories such as turn 1 single target nukers, fast AoE users, parry tanks, and AoE or team-wide heals. But when building out your roster, I would start at the high level and prioritize roles more or less in the following order. AoE damage dealers, preferably of the fast variety, then single target nukers, then healers, then tanks. Note, by the way, if you're coming from MMOs or other games wherein the Holy Trinity is the norm, this is not at all the case in Romancing Saga. You can quite reliably run without a tank, or even without a healer, depending on the circumstance, and it may actually be optimum to do so. All the same though, my personal experience has been that healers especially can sometimes make a team work that would otherwise fail, and the same is true for tanks. Once you're satisfied that you've got those high-level roles covered on your team, it's time to start specializing. This means focusing next on the sub-roles and on two roles I haven't even mentioned yet, debuffer and support. Where you decide to focus here is largely going to depend on what the current content demands, what you like to play, or what styles you've managed to pull already. But for the sake of this video, let's look at what the options are. For single target damage dealers, you've got turn 1, 2, or 3 nukers, and high sustainability, all as subcategories. An example representing a couple of these styles is this particular SS Fairy style. She has a reasonably strong turn 1 nuke, as well as good sustainability in the form of draining attack 3 and evasive counter 2. For AoE damage dealers, you've got turn 1, 2, and 3 nukers, and turn 1, 2, and 3 fast AoE nukers. Note that if you are using a turn 2 or 3 AoE damage dealer without the fast attribute, you really want to pair them with some fast attackers to allow them to pull the BP necessary to unleash their turn 2 or 3 nukes. This is true for any turn 2 or 3 nuker. Let's look at an example. Sasha has this 16 BP A power AoE skill Hailstorm, which, when not awakened, means she can only use this on turn 3. She pulled her BP on turns 1 and 2. This means ideally, you want styles with fast AoE skills that can clear both turns 1 and 2 in order to guarantee that Sasha can save her BP for turn 3. Here are the fast AoE damage dealers that I use to give you some examples. For healers, having the option to heal the entire party simultaneously can be situationally useful. And for tanks, you might find benefit from having different specializations such as parry tanks, counterattack tanks, or what I would call traditional high endurance tanks. And lastly, regarding support and debuffers. Support is a little bit hard to talk about because it's so unique to the style in question. The queen of all support styles is Matriarch, to provide an example, because of her Paean of Victory that can boost your party's stats and damage by 30% each time she uses it. Honestly, this skill demands a video all on its own, but just know that entire strategies have been built around using it and abusing it. Another quick example of support, this one from a Platinum style, is Barbara, who with Flamenco Muse can boost your party's attack for 2 turns. With debuffers, we're looking for styles that debuff the enemy's stats, such as agility, strength, dexterity, or intelligence. The general use case here is to decrease your enemy's damage output, and just know that there are 2 basic ways to accomplish this. You either debuff their damage outright, or you debuff their chance to land their attacks. To provide a basic example, if you're fighting a boss who uses elemental skills like heat or cold, debuffing their intelligence should theoretically reduce the damage they deal, which could make or break your party's success in certain situations. Like support styles, this really deserves its own video, but I think you get the general idea. Let's look at a quick example style. The Welfare Platinum Sophia style can be all around useful for new players, not just because of her heal, but because of her ability to debuff the enemy. Bone Crusher, as an example, has a chance to debuff strength, and Skull Splitter, which is inheritable from her A style, debuffs intelligence, making her able to debuff damage output from a wide variety of enemies. So to quickly recap, when deciding where to focus expanding your roster, whether via pulls or by training specific styles, first look at your coverage of the various different damage types, and then look at what roles aren't being fulfilled. To end with, I want to provide a real-world example of putting these principles into action. With the recent Ultra Deluxe banner for Genryu, I found myself tempted to pull for him because of his synergy with Joe, one of my most used styles. However, I'm a minnow who has limited gems to spend, and when I looked at Genryu's general role on a team, it's one that I have covered, in spades. I've put most of my recent focus on acquiring powerful fast AoE users, so adding another power AoE user to the bunch doesn't do a whole lot for me. I also have more than enough coverage for heat damage, and as for cold, Joe honestly does well enough on her own. Thus, I decided my resources would be better used in the future for a style that better addresses the needs of my team, such as a strong blunt or sun damage dealer. I hope this helps. I know a lot of people appreciate recommendations on whether to summon on particular banners, but whether or not a banner is right is ultimately dependent on the individual and their roster. So understanding these principles is, in my mind anyway, the logical first step. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.